Hey, I'm Russell Skeleten. I'm here with Mixmag ANZ talking about my new album, Mentalized. Mentalized, around the time I was making the album, I started getting into people like Darren Brown and the 90s kind of TV UK mentalists who would get out there and convince people to rob a bank just through the power of suggestion. Kind of realized while I was writing a lot of this stuff that the kind of themes that I was writing about or the stuff that I was thinking about at the time, it's I feel like I'm being mentalized 24/7 by my phone, the world around me, the forces of capital that act on us every day, social media, the attention economy. I found that was kind of a lot of what I was going through in the process of writing it. And so it just kind of came together when I started thinking about being mentalized. After I finished Under Utopia, even before it had come out, I was like, let me get back in the studio and just, now that I kind of understand what I'm maybe about, I felt really solid and able to just be like, what else can I do here? What else am I interested in? And how could that sound? How could I develop as a person and as an artist? The music is always a reflection of kind of where you're at as a person. And so it's okay, what experiences and what stuff am I drawn towards in a more kind of intentional way? I remember writing a note in my phone being industrial guitar, breakbeat, congas, bass, as this concept of oh, imagine if I made some music that was this. And then that was kind of I'll experiment with that and see what happens. And it always just moves away from that. Those kind of little jumping off points was a really fun way to do it. I think it showed that I was excited about making music. If I think too hard, it immediately feels fake, which is this funny thing because it's I find I need to separate what I'm creating from a vision of myself as an artist, because otherwise it feels contrived. In order to get yourself into your art, you need to kind of forget who you are for a second, because in that way you discover what you're about. Who you are just comes through. One of the joys of making music in general for me is that you just start doing the thing, and when you come out of whatever you're doing and you look back at it and you kind of can see it, then you're like, oh, this is me. I do find it super therapeutic. Obviously still need actual therapy, but there's a similarity there. But it's its own weird thing I'm addicted to, I guess. I've always been bad at being I want to make a tech house track that's in this certain vibe, and I try, and I'm oh, I don't like it, doesn't feel real. In that way, you can't really control it that much. It's I just don't think that I have the agency to make exactly what I want at all times. You can push it in directions. It's not a concept album where I sit down and be I want to write about our relationship to technology, and I want to write about this feeling I'm having where I hate social media or whatever. But in the process of doing it, there's definitely these things which just kind of come up. And I think that's where, that idea of mentalization kind of comes into it. Every song seems to be working in the space of this relationship between myself and the outside world, and how that's filtered through all the information and media that's coming at me. I was reading a lot of philosophy. There's some people I really who talk about panpsychism and this idea of human consciousness not being this this unique thing that's just the mind, the body, and it being much more about kind of being surrounded by consciousness in all forms, and it's very ecologically minded. I think that informed a lot of it as well, as this way of thinking that does pull me out of the kind of mentalized framework. That process of what I'm thinking about when I'm making music is kind of, in a lot of ways, antithetical to being a musician, musicians are kind of like celebrated, like marketed, you know, and music is a commodity to a certain extent, which is something I just like struggle with constantly. And I've struggled with it more and more throughout this record, you know, mulling on these themes just in my life and in the music. There's definitely been a little bit of a reckoning with how I present myself as an artist and how I interact with like the broader music ecosystem. The space that I find I'm always like working in or always like kind of fascinated with is that zone between like the listener and like the artist, and like, I feel like I'm constantly just struggling with that. Musically, the intention is definitely not to like make the listener think about this thing. It's much less kind of prescriptive than that. How you meet and like how you make authentic connections, that's the exciting part. The idea is like when I'm making music, I'm creating a space for myself as a listener to like, you know, step out of your everyday analytical head. From an audience point of view, you can feel people's energy on stage, like people playing music together. It's kind of a demonstration of sharing the same space emotionally is definitely like a really important thing for music in general, but definitely in what I do.
I think that's so interesting because like expectation is like an enemy of satisfaction, right?
Expectation is a big enemy of satisfaction. The world in which we like hear music these days is so intangible, it's so disconnected. You don't really have that moment of like looking someone in the eye, understanding and like feeling it. These days you kind of do need to figure out what does make you feel good, whether it's like the moment where you can play these songs live, or like running into people who you love who are listening to it, or just the feeling of like some kind of internal knowledge and like Zen satisfaction with like what you've put into the world, whatever it is. I guess is like what music's always been about, right? Transcending together, shared transcendence.